My parents kicked me out to let my golden sister live there, even though I bought. I'm Elise, 35, a successful architect in Boston who thought I'd finally won my parents' approval. After saving for 10 years, I bought them a lakeside retirement home, keeping one room for my visits. Yesterday, I got a shocking call ordering me to clear out my belongings within 48 hours to make space for my recently divorced sister. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe to follow my journey of standing up for myself after years of being the forgotten child. Growing up in a middle-class suburb of Chicago, I always felt like I existed in my younger sister's shadow. My father worked as an accountant at a mid-sized firm, putting in long hours during tax season, while my mother taught fourth grade at the local elementary school. Our lives were comfortable but not extravagant, with family vacations limited to road trips and occasional flights to visit relatives in Florida. Amanda arrived when I was 5 years old, and from that moment, the dynamics in our household shifted dramatically. I remember standing on tiptoes to peek into her crib, my parents cooing over her perfect features and bright blue eyes. "She looks just like a little doll," relatives would exclaim while I stood nearby in my awkward phase, all gangly limbs and unruly brown hair. As we grew older, the comparisons became more explicit and painful. Amanda excelled in gymnastics and dance, her natural grace earning her trophies that filled our living room shelves. I was more academically inclined but introverted, preferring to spend hours sketching buildings and reading about famous architecture. My achievements rarely received the same celebration. "Why can't you be more outgoing like your sister?" my mother would ask when I declined invitations to school dances. Amanda never has trouble making friends. By the time I reached high school, I had accepted my role as the responsible, self-sufficient child. I packed my own lunches, managed my homework independently, and even started working weekends at a local coffee shop at 16. Meanwhile, Amanda received driving lessons from Dad, a car for her 16th birthday, and constant assistance with her homework and projects. The contrast in our treatment became impossible to ignore during my 16th birthday. I had asked for a small celebration with a few friends at our favorite pizza place. My parents had agreed weeks in advance, but the day before, my mother apologetically informed me we needed to reschedule. Amanda's dance team had made it to regionals, and the competition fell on my birthday weekend. "This is such a big opportunity for her," my mother explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "We can celebrate your birthday next weekend, sweetie." I nodded and smiled, having learned that expressing disappointment would only lead to being labeled dramatic or selfish. The following weekend, exhausted from Amanda's competition, my parents ordered takeout and presented me with a hastily purchased gift card. There was no cake, no candles, no special moment. I buried these feelings deep, channeling my energy into academics and planning my escape. College applications became my focus, with scholarships my ticket to independence. When acceptance letters arrived, my parents seemed surprised by the prestigious universities willing to offer me financial aid. "Architecture." My father frowned when I announced my chosen major. "That's an unstable field. Why not accounting or business? Something practical." "Practical doesn't inspire me," I replied, standing firm in my decision. It was one of the few times I directly contradicted my parents' wishes. Throughout college, I worked multiple jobs while maintaining a 3.9 GPA. My roommate Morgan became the first person who truly saw me appreciating my dedication and creativity without comparison to anyone else. Later, I met Jackson in a design collaboration course, and he quickly became another pillar of support. Both understood what my family failed to see: my quiet determination, my eye for detail, and my capacity for caring deeply, despite years of emotional neglect. When I graduated with honors, Morgan and Jackson cheered loudly from the audience. My parents attended but left early to make it back for Amanda's senior recital. By then, I had accepted that I would never be the golden child, but I had found people who valued me for exactly who I was. After graduation, I landed a position at a prestigious architectural firm in Boston. The distance from Chicago provided a buffer that improved my relationship with my family. Our interactions became less frequent but more cordial, limited to holiday visits and occasional phone calls. I built a life centered around my career, my friends, and my growing passion for sustainable urban housing. Meanwhile, Amanda dropped out of college after 2 years, convinced by our parents that her people skills would take her further than a degree. She moved through a series of retail and hospitality jobs, always with our parents' financial support when things got tight. Despite my professional success, family conversations invariably circled back to Amanda's latest ventures and challenges. I learned to accept this dynamic, finding fulfillment outside my family connections. Morgan and Jackson, along with other friends in Boston, became my chosen family, offering the unconditional support and recognition I never received at home. We celebrated promotions, comforted each other through breakups, and created traditions that filled the void left by my biological family. This makeshift family sustained me through my 20s and early 30s, proving that meaningful connections could be built on mutual respect rather than obligation. As I approached my mid-30s, I had created a life rich in purpose and genuine relationships, even if the wound of family favoritism never completely healed. The news about my parents' financial struggles arrived unexpectedly during a routine Sunday phone call. My mother, usually careful to present everything in the best light, let slip that Dad was worried about their retirement savings after some poor investment decisions. "The market crash hit us hard," she explained with uncharacteristic vulnerability, "and the property taxes keep going up. We might need to downsize significantly." I listened, surprised by the flutter of concern in my chest. Despite our complicated relationship, the thought of my parents struggling in their golden years bothered me deeply. That night, I couldn't sleep thinking about their situation and my own financial stability. After years of disciplined saving and smart investments, I had accumulated a substantial nest egg originally intended for my own future home. A week later, the idea crystallized while I was sketching a lakeside cabin for a client. My parents had always dreamed of retiring near water, somewhere peaceful, where Dad could fish and Mom could garden. What if I could provide that for them? The thought sent a rush of conflicting emotions through me: hope that such a gesture might finally earn their recognition, fear of disappointment, and a deep longing to heal old wounds. I called Morgan the next day to talk through my plan. "Are you sure about this, Elise?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "That's your house fund we're talking about." "I know it sounds crazy," I admitted, "but I can rebuild my savings. They're getting older, and this might be my chance to change our relationship, to show them I'm not just the responsible daughter they take for granted." Morgan sighed. "Just promise me you'll protect yourself legally. People can get weird about property, even family." I promised, though I didn't truly believe such precautions would be necessary. These were my parents, after all. For the next 3 months, I dedicated my weekends to house hunting in lake communities within driving distance of Chicago. The search was exhausting but exhilarating. I wanted everything to be perfect: the right layout, beautiful views, and proximity to amenities my parents would enjoy. Finally, I found a charming 3-bedroom house with large windows overlooking a serene lake. The wraparound porch faced west, offering spectacular sunset views. The kitchen featured the open layout my mother had always wanted, and the property included a small dock perfect for fishing. The neighborhood had a community center with activities for seniors and was just 15 minutes from medical facilities. At $425,000, it would consume nearly all of my savings, but seeing the house in person cemented my decision. I could envision my parents there, happy and comfortable. One of the bedrooms would serve as my space when visiting, allowing me to maintain a physical connection to the family I was still trying to fully belong to. The purchasing process was complex and stressful. I arranged for a thorough inspection, negotiated repairs, and navigated mortgage approval as a sole proprietor. My attorney advised keeping the property in my name for at least the first year for tax purposes, with plans to transfer ownership later. Everything was arranged meticulously, my architect's eye for detail extending to every aspect of the transaction. Throughout this process, I kept the purchase a secret, wanting to surprise my parents with the keys in person. I scheduled a weekend visit to Chicago, my stomach fluttering with nervous anticipation. Would they be overwhelmed with gratitude? Would this grand gesture finally make them see me? When I arrived at their modest suburban home, I found them preoccupied with Amanda's latest drama, a disagreement with her boss at the marketing firm, where she'd been working for 6 months. It took nearly an hour before I could steer the conversation away from Amanda's situation. "I actually have some news," I said, my voice slightly shaky, as I pulled out a small wrapped box containing the house keys. My parents exchanged curious glances as they unwrapped the gift. Confusion crossed their faces when they saw the keys. "I bought you a retirement home," I explained, pulling out my tablet to show them photos. "It's on Lake Geneva. 3 bedrooms, a beautiful kitchen for Mom, and a private dock for Dad's fishing. I remembered how you always talked about retiring near water." Their reaction was not the tearful embrace I had imagined. There was surprise, yes, and expressions of gratitude, but also a quick exchange of glances I couldn't quite interpret. "This is very generous, Elise," my father said, studying the photos with a critical eye rather than excitement. "Very generous indeed." "When can we move in?" my mother asked, her practical nature immediately asserting itself. I explained the situation with the title and my attorney's advice about keeping it in my name temporarily. This information created a subtle shift in the atmosphere. "So technically, it's still your house," my father clarified, his tone sharpening slightly. "For now, yes," I explained. "But it's your home. I'll transfer the title to you next year. It's just smarter tax-wise to wait." "I see," he replied, though his expression suggested he didn't entirely approve of this arrangement. Despite this awkward moment, we spent the rest of the afternoon discussing moving logistics. I assured them I would only use my designated room occasionally for visits, emphasizing that this was their home to enjoy. By the end of the day, they seemed to have warmed to the idea, with my mother already planning where her furniture would go and my father researching fishing spots on the lake. As I drove back to the airport that Sunday, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and lingering disappointment. The reaction hadn't been as warmly enthusiastic as I'd hoped, but perhaps my expectations had been unrealistic. What mattered was that I had provided something meaningful for my parents, something that would improve their quality of life. The recognition I craved might come later, I told myself, once they settled in and realized the value of my gift. The following months brought a new rhythm to our family dynamics. My parents sold their suburban home and moved into the lakeside property, sending me photos of sunset views and Dad's first catch from the dock. During monthly visits, I discovered a softer side to our interactions. Mom taught me her secret recipe for apple pie in the spacious kitchen, while Dad and I spent peaceful mornings fishing together, conversations flowing more easily across the still water. "You did good with this place, Elise," he said one morning, watching his line bob in the gentle current. It wasn't effusive praise, but coming from my father, it felt significant. My dedicated room became a genuine retreat, decorated with my architectural books and sketching supplies. Though I still sensed their preference for Amanda in subtle ways, the sharp edge of childhood jealousy had dulled. In this new setting, without constant comparison, I could appreciate my relationship with my parents for what it was: imperfect, but improving. Then came the first hint of trouble. During our weekly phone call, Mom mentioned that Amanda was having a rough patch. "The divorce is getting messy," she explained with a sigh. "And now there's talk of layoffs at her company. She's so worried about providing for little Sophie." I made sympathetic noises, having learned that offering practical solutions to Amanda's problems was rarely welcomed. Throughout the following weeks, my parents' updates focused increasingly on Amanda's deteriorating situation. She had indeed lost her job and was struggling to afford her apartment while fighting for child support from her ex-husband. During my next visit, I noticed my parents seemed distracted and anxious. Over dinner, I finally addressed the elephant in the room. "You both seem worried about Amanda. Is there anything I can do to help?" My mother exchanged a look with my father before responding. "We've been thinking about how to support her through this difficult time. She needs stability for Sophie." "Maybe she could stay here temporarily," I suggested. "My room has that trundle bed that would work for Sophie. I wouldn't mind postponing my next few visits if it would help." Instead of relief, my suggestion was met with an uncomfortable silence. My father cleared his throat. "That's thoughtful, but Amanda would need more space than just your room. She has a lot of things, and Sophie needs her own environment." The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear. I nodded slowly, processing this information as we moved on to safer topics. That night, lying in my room, I wondered if I had misunderstood their intentions, or if they were simply reluctant to ask me directly to give up my space. 2 weeks later, the call came. I was reviewing blueprints in my Boston apartment when my phone lit up with my mother's number. Something in her overly cheerful greeting set off warning bells. Elise, dear, we need to discuss something important. She began, her voice carrying that artificial brightness she used when delivering unwelcome news. Your sister's situation has become critical. Her landlord is selling the building and she needs to move out by the end of the month. That's tough, I replied cautiously. Has she found a new place? Well, that's what we need to talk about. Your father and I think the best solution is for Amanda and Sophie to move in here permanently. The word permanently landed like a stone in my stomach. Into my room, you mean? A pause. Actually, we were thinking they would need that entire wing of the house. That includes your room and the adjacent study. I see, I said, my voice suddenly distant in my own ears. And where would I stay when I visit? Another pause, longer this time. We thought perhaps you could use the pull-out sofa in the living room. It's really quite comfortable for short visits. The implication was clear. My visits were now expected to be both infrequent and brief. I took a deep breath, trying to process this information rationally. Mom, I understand Amanda needs help, but this is still legally my house. I was planning to transfer the title to you next year, but that hasn't happened yet. My mother's tone chilled instantly. I thought this was our home, Elise. You said it was a gift. It is your home, I clarified. But converting my room into permanent space for Amanda is a significant change we should discuss more thoroughly. There's no time for lengthy discussions. Amanda needs to move in this weekend. My mother's voice hardened. We need you to clear out your things within the next 2 days. Your father can box anything you leave behind. The conversation ended shortly afterward, leaving me stunned and hurt. The timeline felt deliberately impossible, my mother surely knowing I couldn't take time off work so abruptly. It seemed designed to force me to leave my belongings behind, effectively erasing my presence from the house I had purchased. That night, I couldn't sleep. The practical architect in me tried to approach the situation logically. Amanda genuinely needed help, especially with Sophie to consider. Perhaps I was being selfish by objecting to this arrangement. Yet another part of me recognized the familiar pattern of being sidelined for my sister's needs, my own boundaries disregarded without second thought. By morning, I had made a decision. I requested an emergency personal day from work and booked a flight to Chicago. If we were going to have this conversation, it would be face-to-face with all parties present. I needed to see their expressions, hear their unfiltered thoughts, and stand my ground in person, rather than being dismissed over the phone. As my plane took off, I rehearsed what I would say, trying to balance compassion with self-respect. This conversation would be difficult, but necessary. One way or another, it would mark a turning point in our family relationship. The 3-hour drive from Chicago O'Hare to the lake house gave me time to rehearse different approaches to the impending confrontation. I practiced calm assertions of my property rights alongside empathetic acknowledgments of Amanda's difficulties. By the time I pulled into the gravel driveway, I felt reasonably prepared for any scenario. What I wasn't prepared for was the moving truck already parked outside and the sight of unfamiliar furniture being carried through the front door. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I watched 2 movers struggle with a pink canopy bed clearly meant for Sophie. The reality of the situation hit me with physical force. They hadn't waited for my response. They had simply proceeded as if my agreement was irrelevant. Taking a steadying breath, I exited the car and approached the house. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard Amanda's voice directing the movers inside. Following the sound, I found her in my bedroom, which had been completely transformed. My bookshelves were gone, my desk missing. In their place stood Amanda's queen-sized bed and her mirrored vanity. The walls, previously adorned with my architectural prints, now displayed her collection of inspirational quotes and fashion photographs. She froze when she saw me, surprise quickly replaced by defensiveness. Elise, Mom didn't say you were coming. Clearly, I replied, struggling to keep my voice even. Where are my things? She gestured vaguely toward the garage. Dad packed everything up yesterday. We didn't think you'd want the hassle of doing it yourself. The casual dismissal of my possessions, my space, and my right to decide sparked a surge of anger I rarely allowed myself to feel toward my family. Where are Mom and Dad? Dad's helping the movers with Sophie's playground equipment for the backyard. Mom went grocery shopping to stock up on Sophie's favorite foods. Amanda brushed past me to adjust a lampshade. They'll be back soon. I stood there watching my sister claim my space with the entitled ease she'd always displayed. 30 years of suppressed frustration threatened to explode, but I forced myself to walk away, heading for the garage to assess the damage to my belongings. The garage was cold and dimly lit. Stacked against the back wall were several cardboard boxes labeled simply, Elise. Opening the nearest one revealed my books haphazardly piled together, some with bent pages. Another contained framed photos with cracked glass architectural models I'd carefully preserved, now broken and jumbled with miscellaneous items from my desk drawers. The carelessness stung more than the taking of the room itself. These weren't just possessions. They were artifacts of my identity, my passion, my professional achievements. Their treatment reflected how little these aspects of me were valued. I was still sorting through the damage when I heard my father's truck pull up. Steeling myself, I walked back to the house, meeting my parents as they unloaded grocery bags from the vehicle. My mother's face registered shock, quickly masked by artificial brightness. "Elise? What a surprise. We weren't expecting you until next month." "Clearly," I echoed my earlier response to Amanda. "Since you've already packed up my room and moved Amanda in." My father at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "We tried to call you yesterday to discuss the arrangements." "One call, Dad. You left one message saying you needed to talk about Amanda staying here. That's not a discussion, and it certainly wasn't permission to pack up my things and give away my room in the house that I bought." My mother's smile vanished. "There's no need for that tone, Elise. Family helps family in times of need. Amanda and Sophie have nowhere else to go." "I understand that, but this is still legally my house. I'm the one making the mortgage payments. Shouldn't I have some say in major decisions about who lives here?" My father's expression hardened. "This house is our home. You gave it to us as a gift." "A gift I'm still paying for," I clarified. "I was planning to transfer the title to you next year, but that hasn't happened yet." "So now you're holding that over our heads?" My mother's voice rose, her face flushing. "After all we've done for you." The audacity of this statement momentarily robbed me of speech. What exactly had they done for me that compared to my purchasing them a lakefront property? Before I could formulate a response, Amanda emerged from the house with Sophie in tow. My 5-year-old niece ran toward my mother, effectively derailing the conversation as everyone's attention shifted to her. It was a familiar pattern, Amanda's presence, or now Sophie's, creating a distraction that prevented resolution of any conflict. Later that evening, after Sophie was in bed, the 4 adults gathered in the living room for what my father termed a family meeting. The atmosphere was tense, the seating arrangement telling my parents and Amanda on the sectional sofa, me alone in an armchair across from them. "Elise," my father began in his business negotiation voice, "we understand you're upset about the room situation, but you have to look at the bigger picture. Amanda is a single mother now. Sophie needs stability, a good school district, a safe neighborhood. This house provides all that." "I don't disagree," I replied carefully. "I'm not saying Amanda shouldn't stay here. I'm saying this decision should have involved me, especially since it affects my access to the house I'm still paying for." "You're being selfish," my mother interjected. "You're a successful professional with a good income. Amanda has lost everything in this divorce. Sophie needs her grandmother and grandfather around. What's more important, your occasional weekend visits or your niece's well-being?" The false dichotomy was infuriating but familiar. Throughout my childhood, my needs had been positioned as being in competition with Amanda's, with the implication that prioritizing myself was inherently selfish. "This isn't about competing needs," I tried to explain. "It's about respect and proper communication. You could have called me weeks ago to discuss options. We could have talked about renovating the basement into a mother-in-law suite or finding Amanda an affordable apartment nearby." Amanda scoffed. "We don't have time for renovation projects. Sophie starts school next month and I need to be settled." "Then perhaps you should have started planning earlier instead of expecting everyone to scramble at the last minute to accommodate you," I replied, my patience finally wearing thin. My sister's eyes widened at the uncharacteristic pushback. Typically, I was the peacemaker, the one who stepped aside to avoid conflict. "Wow," she said. "When did you get so cold? This is your niece we're talking about." "This isn't about Sophie. This is about respect, boundaries, and property rights." I insisted, struggling to keep my voice calm. "I bought this house. My name is on the deed. Legally, any major changes should involve my consent." My father's expression darkened. "So that's how it is. You wave legal documents in our faces. This house is a family home now, Elise. Your mother and I make the decisions here." Something in his tone prompted me to ask, "What do you mean by that exactly?" A look passed between my parents that sent a chill down my spine. My father stood abruptly. "I need to get some air," he announced, heading for the door. After he left, an uncomfortable silence descended. My mother busied herself straightening cushions while Amanda examined her manicure with sudden fascination. The evasiveness in their behavior triggered my suspicion. "What aren't you telling me?" I asked directly. My mother sighed dramatically. "Your father didn't want to upset you, but since you're being so difficult about this whole situation, perhaps you should know. We've already spoken to a lawyer about transferring the house title." The casual way she delivered this bombshell made it all the more shocking. "You what?" "It was going to happen eventually anyway," Amanda interjected. "Dad just moved the timeline up a bit." A horrible suspicion formed in my mind. What exactly did this lawyer tell you? Neither would meet my eyes. Following my instincts, I moved to my father's home office, ignoring my mother's protests. In the bottom drawer of his desk, where he always kept important documents, I found a folder labeled House Transfer. Inside were consultation notes from a lawyer, along with drafted documents that appeared to include my signature. The signature that was most definitely not mine. My father returned to find me standing in his office, the documents trembling in my hand. "You forged my signature," I said, my voice barely audible. He didn't deny it. Instead, he said, "The lawyer suggested it might be complicated to transfer the title without your direct involvement. We were going to tell you after it was done, present it as a fait accompli." "You always go along with things eventually, Elise." The casual cruelty of this statement, the absolute certainty that I would accept whatever they decided, broke something fundamental in me. 3 decades of accommodating their preferences, accepting second place, and seeking approval through self-sacrifice crystallized into a single moment of absolute clarity. "This is fraud," I said quietly. "What you've attempted to do is actually criminal." My mother appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "Don't be dramatic, Elise. We're family." "Family doesn't commit fraud against each other, Mom. Family doesn't forge signatures or make unilateral decisions about property they don't own." "You've always been so generous before," she countered, her voice taking on a wheedling quality. "Always happy to help your sister. Why are you being difficult now when she needs you most? When Sophie needs you?" "This isn't about generosity. It's about respect. You didn't ask, you took. You didn't discuss, you decided. And when I objected, you tried to manipulate me with guilt about Sophie." "You're just jealous of your sister," my mother said, reverting to an accusation from my childhood. "You've always resented the attention she gets." The familiar hurt flared, but this time it was accompanied by anger rather than shame. "No, Mom. I resent being taken for granted. I resent being expected to sacrifice everything while Amanda sacrifices nothing. I resent that my contribution, my literal house, is treated as communal property, while my space, my belongings, and my feelings are treated as expendable." My father stepped forward, attempting to take the documents from my hand. "Let's all calm down. We can work this out." I stepped back, clutching the folder. "There's nothing to work out. These documents are evidence of attempted fraud. I'm taking them with me." "You wouldn't go to the police?" my mother gasped. "Not over a family matter." "No," I agreed. "But I will be speaking to my own lawyer first thing tomorrow morning." With that, I left the office, gathered my purse, and walked out the front door, ignoring their calls behind me. In the car, my hands shook so badly I could barely insert the key into the ignition. Once I managed to start the car, I drove away from the lake house, tears blurring my vision despite my best efforts to remain composed. Only when I reached the main road did I pull over the reality of what had just happened, crashing over me in waves. I had just threatened legal action against my own parents. I had walked away from the family home I had purchased, leaving Amanda installed in my room. Most significantly, I had finally confronted the fundamental imbalance in our family dynamic after decades of acceptance. Through my tears, I found Morgan's number on my phone and pressed call. Her steady voice answered on the third ring, a lifeline in that moment of profound disorientation. "Morgan," I managed to say, my voice breaking. "Everything's gone wrong. I don't know what to do." "Where are you?" she asked immediately, concern evident in her tone. "In my car, somewhere near the lake house. My parents, they tried to—" I couldn't continue, overwhelmed by the betrayal. "Listen to me," Morgan said firmly. "Find a hotel for tonight. Text me the address. I'll book a flight out first thing tomorrow morning." Her practical response anchored me, providing a next step when I couldn't think clearly. "Okay," I agreed. "A hotel. I can do that. And Elise? Whatever happened, remember who you are. The strong, brilliant woman I know. The person who builds beautiful things and cares deeply. Don't let them make you forget that." Her words cut through the fog of hurt and confusion, reminding me of the identity I had built outside my family's narrow perception. "Thank you," I whispered. I needed to hear that. After ending the call, I sat in the car for several minutes, rain beginning to patter against the windshield. The weather matched my mood, but Morgan's reminder helped me gather enough strength to find a nearby hotel. As I checked in, my phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from my parents and Amanda, which I left unanswered. Tonight, I needed space to process what had happened and decide on my next steps. In the anonymous quiet of the hotel room, I spread the documents on the bed, examining the evidence of my family's betrayal more carefully. The forgery wasn't even particularly good, nothing like my actual signature. The casual sloppiness of it somehow made the violation worse, as if they hadn't even respected me enough to properly imitate my handwriting. Sleep eluded me that night as I cycled through grief, anger, and periods of strange calm. By morning, exhausted but resolute, I knew that whatever happened next would fundamentally change my relationship with my family. The question was whether anything would remain worth salvaging from the wreckage. The hotel room felt both sanctuary and prison as I awaited Morgan's arrival. My phone continued to buzz with messages, which I finally began to read around dawn. My father's texts progressed from commanding, "Call us immediately to discuss this situation," to vaguely threatening, "You're making a serious mistake that will damage this family," to finally surprisingly contrite, "Please call, we should have handled this differently." My mother's messages followed a different trajectory, beginning with guilt trips. "How could you upset your father like this? You know his blood pressure," and moving to revisionist history. "We've always supported your career even when we didn't understand it, after everything we've done for you." The most revealing messages came from Amanda. "You've always been jealous of me and now you're punishing my daughter for it," followed hours later by, "Dad says you could make legal trouble for them. You wouldn't really do that, would you? Over a stupid bedroom." The lack of understanding was breathtaking. This wasn't about a bedroom. It was about decades of being undervalued, culminating in an actual crime committed against me by my own parents. Morgan arrived just after noon, her familiar face a balm to my raw emotions. She listened without interruption as I recounted everything from the initial phone call to the discovery of the forged documents. When I finished, she examined the papers herself, her expression darkening. "This is serious, Elise, not just emotionally but legally. These documents would have transferred property worth hundreds of thousands of dollars without your consent." "I know," I acknowledged. Part of me can't believe they would go this far. "The other part isn't surprised at all." Morgan squeezed my hand. "What do you want to do now?" The question hung between us. Despite everything, the thought of pressing charges against my parents made me physically ill. Yet returning to the status quo seemed impossible. "I need legal advice," I finally said. "Someone who can tell me my options without the emotional entanglement." Morgan nodded. "I have a friend from college who practices family law. Her name is Diana Rodriguez. I can call her right now if you want." 2 hours later, we sat in Diana's office in downtown Chicago, the forged documents spread across her desk. Her expression remained professional, but I detected a flicker of shock as she examined the papers. "This is unambiguous forgery," she confirmed. "And yes, it's a criminal offense. However, you have options that don't necessarily involve pressing charges." She outlined 3 potential approaches: I could file a police report and pursue criminal charges. I could threaten legal action as leverage for a negotiated solution. Or I could sell the house and recoup my investment, effectively removing the property from the equation entirely. Whatever you decide, Diana advised, document everything from this point forward. Record conversations if legal in your location, save all text messages and emails, and communicate in writing whenever possible. Armed with this advice and Diana's card, I felt more grounded. The nebulous betrayal had been transformed into concrete legal issues with potential solutions. I now had a framework for decisions, rather than just a swirl of hurt feelings. My phone rang as Morgan and I left the office. My father again. This time I answered, putting the call on speaker so Morgan could hear. "Elise, thank God." He began, his voice uncharacteristically anxious. "We've been worried sick." "Where are you?" "I'm safe," I replied neutrally. "I've been speaking with a lawyer about the forged documents." A long pause. "Elise, we made a mistake. We should have talked to you properly about the house situation." "Yes, you should have. Instead, you attempted to commit fraud." Another pause. "That's a very harsh way to put it." "It's the legally accurate way to put it, Dad. My lawyer was quite clear on that point." His tone shifted, becoming more businesslike. "What do you want, Elise, to put your parents in jail, to make your sister and niece homeless?" The emotional manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. "What I want is respect and legal compliance. I'm willing to discuss solutions, but only with all cards on the table and with proper legal representation." "You're bringing lawyers into a family matter." He sounded genuinely shocked. "You brought fraud into a family matter," I countered. That changed the stakes considerably. After some back and forth, we agreed to a meeting the following day at a neutral location, a conference room Diana had offered for our use. Both sides would bring legal representation, and we would explore potential resolutions. That night, over room service in the hotel, Morgan helped me prepare for the meeting. "You need to decide your bottom line," she advised. "What outcome would feel like justice to you?" I considered the question carefully. "I want acknowledgement of what they did. No minimizing or excuses. I want compensation for the house, either through them purchasing it from me at fair market value or selling it and returning my investment. And I want—" I hesitated, the last item feeling almost childish to articulate. "What?" Morgan prompted gently. "I want them to see me. Really see me. Not as the reliable daughter they can take advantage of, but as a person with my own needs and boundaries." Morgan nodded, understanding the deeper wound behind the legal issues. "The first two are achievable through legal means. The third might take more time and may never fully happen. Are you prepared for that possibility?" Her question struck at the heart of my struggle. Was I ready to accept that my parents might never see me the way I deserved to be seen? That the recognition I had sought my entire life might never come? "I think I have to be," I finally said. "This situation has shown me that continuing to seek their approval isn't healthy. It's time to define my worth on my own terms, not theirs." The meeting the next day was tense but productive. My parents arrived with their lawyer, a family friend who looked distinctly uncomfortable with the situation. Amanda had not been invited, a decision that clearly irritated my mother, but which Diana had insisted upon, as Amanda was not a legal party to the property dispute. My father surprisingly took the lead in acknowledging wrongdoing. "We acted impulsively and inappropriately," he admitted, avoiding the word illegally, but at least taking responsibility. "We should have consulted you about Amanda moving in, and we absolutely should not have attempted to transfer the property without your explicit consent." My mother nodded stiffly beside him, but remained silent. Their lawyer presented their proposal. They would purchase the house from me at full market value, using their retirement savings and a new mortgage. Amanda and Sophie would continue living there with my parents. In exchange, I would not pursue criminal charges for the forgery. Diana and I stepped out to discuss the offer privately. "It's a reasonable solution," she advised. "You get fair compensation for the property, they face financial consequences for their actions, without criminal charges, and everyone can move forward." I agreed, and we returned to accept the offer with one addition. I wanted a formal written apology, acknowledging the attempted fraud, to be signed by both parents. This request created visible tension, but after a whispered conference with their lawyer, they agreed. The paperwork would take time to process, but the framework of the agreement was established. As we prepared to leave, my mother finally spoke directly to me. "I hope someday you'll understand we were just trying to help Amanda and Sophie," she said, unable to resist one last attempt at justification. I looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time, seeing her not as my mother, but as a flawed human with her own biases and limitations. "I understand perfectly," I replied quietly. "You were helping Amanda at my expense as you've done my entire life. The difference is that now I understand I deserve better." Her face registered shock, then hurt, but I turned away before she could respond. This wasn't about hurting her or winning an argument. It was about finally speaking my truth after decades of silence. Outside the building, I felt lighter than I had in years, as if setting boundaries had physically unburdened me. Morgan hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you," she said. "That took incredible courage." "It's just the beginning," I replied, knowing that redefining my relationship with my family would be an ongoing process, not a single confrontation. But it's a start. In the days following the legal meeting, my phone remained eerily silent. No calls from my mother, no texts from Amanda. Only my father sent a brief message confirming they were proceeding with the mortgage application to buy the house. The sudden absence of communication after a lifetime of entanglement created a strange vacuum in my life. I returned to Boston with Morgan, trying to reestablish my normal routine. Work provided a welcome distraction, but nights were difficult. I would lie awake replaying fragments of conversation from the lake house confrontation, questioning whether I had been too harsh or not firm enough. Jackson organized a small gathering at his apartment to welcome me home, inviting mutual friends who had become my chosen family over the years. Their unconditional support contrasted sharply with what I had experienced from my biological family, highlighting what healthy relationships should feel like. "So what happens now?" Jackson asked as we shared takeout on his balcony overlooking the Charles River. "Legally, we wait for the property transaction to complete," I explained. "Personally, I'm not sure. I'm taking it day by day." Morgan joined us, passing around fortune cookies. "Have you thought about talking to someone professional about all this? A therapist specializing in family trauma might help?" I nodded, having already considered this. "I found someone recommended for adult children of emotionally immature parents. My first appointment is next week." The fortune in my cookie read, "New beginnings are often disguised as painful endings." The timing of this message felt almost too perfect, making us all laugh despite the heaviness of the conversation. 3 weeks after returning to Boston, I received the formal apology letter my parents had agreed to provide. The language was stiff and clearly crafted by their lawyer, but their signatures at the bottom were genuine. My father had added a handwritten note at the bottom: "I am truly sorry, Elise. I lost sight of what matters." Whether this represented genuine remorse or just an attempt to smooth things over remained unclear. I filed the letter away, neither responding to it nor dismissing it entirely. Time would reveal whether their actions would match these written words. The property transaction proceeded smoothly, with my parents securing a mortgage to purchase the lake house at market value. The closing date was set for the following month, after which my financial connection to the property would be completely severed. Meanwhile, I began therapy sessions with Dr. Abigail Freeman, a compassionate woman in her 50s who specialized in family dynamics and boundary setting. Our initial sessions focused on unpacking the patterns established in my childhood and how they had shaped my adult relationships. "The need for parental approval doesn't automatically disappear when we grow up," she explained during one particularly insightful session. "Many adults continue seeking validation from parents who are fundamentally incapable of providing it." "So what's the alternative?" I asked. "Just giving up on ever having a healthy relationship with them?" "Not necessarily giving up," she clarified, "but shifting your expectations and focus. Instead of seeking their approval, focus on approving of yourself. Build your sense of worth from within and from healthier relationships in your life." This perspective helped me navigate the emotional aftermath of the lake house situation. Rather than obsessing over whether my parents would eventually understand my perspective, I concentrated on validating my own feelings and decisions. I began keeping a journal documenting instances where I successfully maintained boundaries both with family and in other relationships. The property closing came and went, transferring a substantial sum into my account. I decided to use this money intentionally, not just as financial capital, but as a symbol of reclaiming my power. After careful consideration, I purchased a beautiful two-bedroom condo near the ocean in Marblehead, a coastal town north of Boston I had always loved. The second bedroom became a combined guest room and home office filled with natural light, perfect for architectural sketching. Unlike the lake house, this property was chosen solely for my preferences and needs. The sound of waves outside my window and the scent of salt air became daily reminders of my new commitment to self-respect. 6 months after the lake house confrontation, I received an unexpected email from my father. He shared that he had been seeing a counselor at my mother's insistence following some concerning behavior on his part. The counselor had apparently helped him recognize patterns of favoritism and emotional neglect in his parenting. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he wrote near the end. "Just letting you know that I'm trying to understand how we got here. Your mother is still struggling with everything that happened, but I hope someday we can rebuild some kind of relationship on healthier terms." I read the email several times, discussing it with Dr. Freeman in our next session. "This appears to be a genuine attempt at introspection," she observed. "How do you feel about it?" "Cautiously hopeful," I admitted, "but also protective of the boundaries I've established. I'm not ready to rush back into regular contact." "That's a perfectly reasonable response," she assured me. "Healing happens at its own pace, and rebuilding trust takes time." I responded to my father's email with brief appreciation for his message and honesty about my own ongoing process of healing. I didn't commit to immediate reconnection, but left the door slightly open for future communication. Around the same time, I made a significant professional decision. After years at a large corporate firm, I left to join a smaller practice specializing in affordable housing and community spaces. The pay was less, but the work aligned more closely with my values and provided greater creative fulfillment. Morgan and Jackson helped me celebrate this transition with a housewarming party at my new condo. Surrounded by friends who valued me for exactly who I was, I realized I had created the acceptance and recognition I had sought from my family all along, just from different sources. A year after the lake house incident, I received a wedding invitation from a cousin on my mother's side. Attending would mean seeing my parents and Amanda for the first time since our legal settlement. After careful consideration and discussion with Dr. Freeman, I decided to go viewing it as an opportunity to test the new boundaries I had established from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. The wedding itself was beautiful, held in a historic Chicago hotel with views of Lake Michigan. I arrived independently, staying at a nearby hotel rather than with family as I would have in the past. This simple decision symbolized my new approach: engaged, but separate, present, but protected. When I first saw my parents across the reception hall, the initial shock of recognition gave way to a strange calm. They seemed smaller somehow, less intimidating than in my memories. My mother noticed me first, nudging my father, who gave a tentative wave. I nodded in acknowledgement, but continued chatting with other relatives before gradually making my way to their table. "You look well, Elise," my mother said, her eyes taking in my new haircut and the confidence in my posture. There was something almost wistful in her expression. "Thank you," I replied simply. "You both do too." We exchanged careful pleasantries, navigating this new territory of polite distance. Amanda was notably absent from the conversation, having chosen to remain at her table across the room. The unresolved tension between us remained palpable even at this distance. Later in the evening, my father found a moment to speak with me privately. "Your cousin mentioned you're working on affordable housing projects now," he said. "That sounds meaningful." "It is," I confirmed. "Less money, more satisfaction." He nodded thoughtfully. "I always pushed you toward financial security because I worried about you, but maybe I underestimated what you needed most." The simple acknowledgement, perhaps the first of its kind from him, touched something deep within me. Not enough to erase the past, but enough to suggest that perhaps tiny steps toward mutual understanding were possible. As I drove back to my hotel that night, I reflected on the long journey from the lake house confrontation to this moment. The wounds were not fully healed, and perhaps never would be. The relationship with my family had fundamentally changed, becoming more distant, but paradoxically more honest than before. What had changed most significantly was my relationship with myself. No longer defined by the role of the reliable, accommodating daughter seeking approval, I had emerged as a woman who understood her worth independent of others' recognition. The house I had bought for my parents had in a roundabout way led to building a home within myself, one with strong foundations and clear boundaries. In my Ocean View condo back in Marblehead, I established new traditions and rhythms. Sunday brunches with Morgan and her new partner, monthly dinner clubs with colleagues from my firm, volunteer work teaching architecture to high school students from underserved communities. Each activity represented a choice made from authentic desire, rather than obligation, or the need for validation. I even established a small scholarship fund for architecture students from difficult family backgrounds, using part of the proceeds from the lake house sale. Helping others who understood the complex journey of redefining family relationships became an unexpected source of healing. Did I miss the closeness of family sometimes? Of course. The culturally idealized version of supportive parents and sibling bonds occasionally haunted me, especially during holidays or milestone moments. But I had learned to honor that longing without letting it diminish the richness of the connections I had built. As Dr. Freeman often reminded me, the family we create through choice can be just as meaningful as the family we're born into, sometimes more so. 2 years after the lake house incident, I stood on the balcony of my Marblehead condo, watching waves crash against the rocky shoreline below. The rhythmic pattern had become a meditation of sorts, a reminder of life's continuous movement forward despite obstacles. My therapy sessions with Dr. Freeman had gradually decreased from weekly to monthly, now serving more as check-ins than intensive treatment. The raw wound of family betrayal had scarred over, still visible, but no longer acutely painful with every movement. The healing journey isn't linear, Dr. Freeman had observed in our most recent session. There will still be difficult days, triggered memories, but you've built resilience and self-awareness that serve as buffers against those moments. She was right. I still occasionally dreamed about the lake house waking with a lingering sense of loss. But these episodes were becoming rarer, replaced by dreams of my current home and the life I was creating day by day. My relationship with my parents had settled into a carefully managed distance. Birthday cards, occasional emails, brief phone calls on holidays. My father made more consistent efforts at connection, sending articles about architecture he thought might interest me or asking questions about my current projects. My mother remained more reserved, perhaps still struggling to reconcile the independent woman I had become with the compliant daughter she had expected me to remain. Amanda and I maintained almost no direct contact, though I sent gifts to Sophie on her birthday and Christmas. The complex emotions between us remained largely unaddressed, a conversation perhaps for another time when wounds were less fresh. The professional transition to the smaller community-focused architectural firm had proven deeply satisfying. My current project involved designing affordable housing units that incorporated green spaces and community areas, creating environments where families could thrive rather than merely exist. The work connected to something fundamental in me, perhaps born from my own journey of creating a true home beyond physical structures. Morgan remained my closest friend, her unwavering support during the lake house crisis having deepened our bond. She had recently become engaged to Layla, a brilliant environmental lawyer she had met through a mutual friend. They had asked me to design renovations for the historic Beacon Hill townhouse they had purchased together, a project I approached with particular joy and attention to detail. Jackson, too, continued to be a steadfast presence, though his work as a museum architectural consultant now took him traveling frequently. When in Boston, he always made time for our tradition of takeout and ridiculous action movies, a ritual that had sustained us through graduate school and beyond. Through these friendships and new connections I had made in Marblehead, I had built what Dr. Freeman called my chosen family. Unlike the conditional acceptance I had experienced growing up, these relationships were based on mutual respect and genuine appreciation for who I truly was. Perhaps the most significant development in my healing journey came unexpectedly through my volunteer work with high school students interested in architecture. Teaching weekend workshops at a community center in Roxbury, I met teenagers facing various challenges, many from families with complex dynamics of their own. Ariana, a particularly talented 16-year-old with a remarkable eye for sustainable design, reminded me of myself at that age, determined, creative, and navigating difficult family expectations. After one session where she had struggled with a demanding project, I shared a simplified version of my own family experience. Sometimes the people who should support us the most are the least equipped to do so, I told her. That doesn't diminish your talent or your worth. Her response stayed with me. So how do you know what you're worth if they can't see it? The question echoed my own longtime struggle, but this time I had an answer that felt authentically earned. You learn to see it yourself, and you find people who reflect back the truth of who you are. It's hard work, but it's worth doing. The opportunity to transform my painful experience into wisdom that might help someone else brought an unexpected layer of meaning to what had happened. The lake house incident, with all its hurt and betrayal, had also become a turning point that allowed me to develop strengths I might otherwise never have discovered. This realization crystallized one evening as I finalized designs for a community garden space that would be part of my current housing project. I had incorporated elements specifically designed to bring different generations together, creating opportunities for connection across age groups. Perhaps my understanding of fractured family dynamics had given me insight into creating spaces that could foster healthier relationships. The irony wasn't lost on me that my parents' betrayal over a house had ultimately led me to a deeper understanding of what home truly meant. Not simply a physical structure, regardless of how beautiful or expensive, but a space where one feels genuinely seen, respected, and valued. I continued to build that kind of home in my daily life through honest friendships, meaningful work, and ongoing self-discovery. The boundaries I maintained with my family weren't walls of resentment, but rather healthy delineations that protected the new life I had created. Was there still sadness about what might have been? Yes, particularly around the relationship with my sister that had never had the chance to mature into adult friendship. I sometimes wondered about parallel universes where our parents had fostered connection rather than competition between us, where we might have supported each other through life's challenges instead of becoming adversaries. But I had also come to accept that living in possibility rather than reality wasn't productive. The family I had was the family I had, with all their limitations and flaws. My responsibility was not to change them, but to ensure their patterns didn't define my future. On particularly clear days when the Atlantic stretched endlessly blue before my balcony, I sometimes thought about the lakeside view my parents now enjoyed, wondering if they ever reflected on the cost of that view, not just in dollars but in relationship currency. Whether they recognized what had been lost in their determination to prioritize Amanda's needs above all else. But increasingly, these thoughts came without the sharp sting of rejection or the desperate longing for recognition that had previously accompanied them. Instead, they were simply observations, pieces of a story that had shaped but no longer controlled me. Dr. Freeman had asked in a recent session what I would say to my younger self if I could go back to the time before the lake house purchase. After careful consideration, I had answered, I would tell her she deserves to be valued for who she is, not what she provides, that genuine love doesn't require constant sacrifice, and that sometimes the family we create through choice brings more healing than the one we're born into. This wisdom, hard-won through painful experience, had become the foundation of my rebuilt life. Not perfect, not without occasional tremors of old pain, but authentically mine in a way my previous existence had never been. As the sun began to set over the ocean, painting the waves in shades of gold and rose, I felt a deep sense of peace that had once seemed impossible. The house I had lost had led me to the home I had found within myself, a journey I would not have chosen, but now recognized as necessary. Sometimes losing what we think we want opens the door to discovering what we truly need. Have you ever experienced a situation where family expectations and your own needs were in conflict? How did you navigate that balance? I've found that setting boundaries can be the most loving thing we can do, both for ourselves and ultimately for our relationships. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, sometimes the most challenging chapters of our lives become the ones that truly define our strength. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage on your own path to creating a life that honors your worth.